I'm not going to sit here and say my spiritual ideas are the truth because I experienced them and this is truth. I don't know what truth is. So truth is something that is co-created in relationship.
Hello and welcome to Self Talk. I'm your host, Rachel Astarte. Today, my guest is Andra Dediu. She supports individuals to integrate the highs and lows experienced as a result of big moments of psychospiritual change, like spiritual awakenings, mystical experiences, and insights from altered states of consciousness. This is such an important thing. More and more people are having these big spiritual experiences. More and more people are experimenting with altered states of consciousness, whether it's shamanic or psychedelic. And a lot of people just don't know what to do with those experiences or what they should do or can do. And so Andra's here to talk to us about that. And I'm so grateful to have you here. So welcome.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about that. First, if you wouldn't mind, what defines a spiritual awakening, mystical experience, altered state of consciousness? How do people know if they've had one, if they haven't created it for themselves, like through a ritual or something?
Yeah, so sometimes they can be created through rituals, through spiritual practices. Sometimes they happen spontaneously. And when they happen spontaneously, when individuals are in them, they know because it's almost like they've walked through a doorway and their whole being is radically shifted, right? Like the way that they look at themselves, the way that they experience their body, the way that they move through space, the way that they relate to other people in their family or their friends, their habits change. They won't necessarily be interested to do the things that they were previously doing. A lot of individuals desire to be really, really secluded. So they might be really, really social previously, and then they have this experience and they're just radically changed. Sometimes their values change as well. They become more spiritual, whereas perhaps previously they weren't really spiritual. Like maybe they dabbled in psychedelics or entheogens. They dabbled in altered states because it was like kind of like the fun thing to do, and it was an experience to come out of the boring, mundane life. But then once they've walked through this doorway, it's almost like, oh, this is part of my being. This is extremely important to me. This is of value to me. And they really choose to walk this earth differently. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying they'll know like radical shifts will happen in their life. And that can be really disorienting. What are some of the feelings that you've experienced with your clients and students that they come to you saying, I don't know how to manage this?
So a lot of people feel kind of ashamed, really scared that there's no control, overwhelmed. Uh, and some individuals have seeked out help from other therapists and have been told that they're having like a psychotic break, or they have psychotic like tendencies and they're given a label, or they have bipolar as well. That's another one. Um, and this is really scary to receive that. Yeah. Um, because individuals then want to really kind of protect themselves, right? So they don't want to share their experiences. They don't want to talk about it with people because they don't think that others will understand what's happening to them. Another thing that happens is there's this sort of grandiosity that might come to individuals, like, oh, I've experienced this. This is special. Aren't I amazing that I have been chosen to have this type of experience. So that one has to be watched carefully as well. That's a tricky one. But all of these, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that comes to mind, when you said that some therapists would diagnose this as a mental illness, which of course in shamanic sense, there is no mental illness, there's spiritual illness. But as a therapist yourself, how can people know if they're actually having a psychotic break versus having a spiritual or mystical awakening?
The key point is that they identify their experience as spiritual. Like they themselves believe that they're having a spiritual experience. And the other takeaway is danger. Are they a danger to themselves or to other people? Yeah. So if they're about to, believe that they're God and that they can fly and jump off a building because of that, then that is maybe they're still having a spiritual awakening, but because there's that danger to their life, then they need different support, right? They need something more solid, and they might need to be contained a little bit more carefully. The other one is if they're a danger to other people, right? So if they think that people are coming after them and therefore they have weapons to protect themselves, or they're going after other people, that's another thing where it becomes a little bit more, quote, an illness as opposed to a healing experience. But and even when I say that, right, like it's a continuum. So even these, quote, illnesses can become spiritual experiences, can become healing experiences, and they often do, right? So there isn't a hard divide, unfortunately, not yet.
Yeah. And perhaps the more science and spirituality comes together, which it is starting to happen now, that delineation will be easier to mark. So thank you for clarifying that. Before we get too far into it, I'm really curious. I've been curious about this ever since I met you, but I would love to know, how did you come to this specific specialty? What was it in your own life or that you saw out in the outside world that made you say, this is work I want to or need to do?
So I experienced my own spiritual emergency from yoga and meditation practice. And then I sort of came back down to earth, as I name it. And it took me a few years to come back down. And once I came back down, then I decided to do a master's in consciousness and transpersonal psychology because I had these deeply embodied spiritual values. And I knew that I wanted to, during my spiritual emergency, the key thing that came from me was that I am here to support the transformation of consciousness on earth. And so then I was like, oh, well, I'll do a master's in transpersonal psychology. And then when I did my master's, I realized I learned of this term, spiritual emergency. And the way that it was described, I was like, oh, I had that. I didn't have a spiritual awakening. I had a spiritual emergency. And then I obviously, because I had experienced it, I got super passionate about it. And I started researching and reading and reading and reading. And what I discovered is that there's a lot of theoretical information, but there's not a lot of research done. And then I wanted to do research. As part of my master's program, I had to do a research dissertation. And I just jumped into researching spiritual emergencies and spiritual crisis because I realized that there's this gap, right? There's more and more people that are having these experiences. And even this is anecdotal data. It hasn't been researched. And then there's this other bucket of really theoretical writings from various transpersonal psychologists like Stanislav Grof and et cetera, so many. But there's no actual research on spiritual emergency. Like, what happens to these individuals? What is their actual experience? What happens afterwards? How do they transform? How do they ground? Are they in this sort of crisis situations for life? And I knew from myself that it was such a positive experience for myself. So I mean, I was kind of biased as a researcher because I knew that there was some positive outlook that could come out of it, but I also really, really wanted to research it. So once I researched it, then while I was doing my research, I just realized that there was this huge gap in regards to people receiving the support. And then as well, I could self-reflect that while I was going through my own experience, I didn't find people that could support me, right? Like I did not approach therapists. No way. The yoga teacher that I did approach wasn't very helpful, bless him. But his response was, "Oh, I experienced that too in India. Oh, well, that sucks." And that was kind of it. And then I approached my shamanic teacher, and she told me to take another journey with my spirit guides, which again was not helpful for me. I was already receiving too much information into my system. I didn't need more information. I needed information to understand like what this means, how to process it, what do I do, how to ground, right? But anywho, so I realized that there's this huge gap of people not receiving effective support. And the fact that our mental institutions still don't understand what psychosis is. Like an academic review from just last year shows that there's the definition of psychosis is still ambiguous. There's not that there's no, but there's very little respect for spiritual and mystical experiences. And there is this upwelling from transpersonal psychology that's really pushing the paradigm of viewing all non-ordinary experiences as psychosis. But so like there was just so many little bits, right? Like the research, the lack of support, me receiving a lack of support, that it was just like I have to, like it was just such a big open space for me to step into. It was so inviting. And I had to, right? Knowing what my calling was, seeing this gap, knowing my personal experience, wanting to be a support system, that it was just, well, okay, here I go. Here I go. And here I am.
Yeah. So, and isn't that often how it is, that we get called to the work because we're experiencing it and there are no answers for us? We have to, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So not that you're inventing this, but finding those resources. So point of clarification, just for the listeners who might not understand or have questions, what is the difference between spiritual awakening and spiritual emergency?
Mm-hmm. So a spiritual awakening tends to be a little bit more of a gentle process. Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah, so there's still this sort of walking through the doorway, like we talked about at the beginning, but it's gentle enough, it's slow enough that individuals can integrate their experiences and they can emerge naturally into a more spiritual way of living and being. Versus a spiritual emergency is a crisis. Individuals become destabilized, they are scared, they are overwhelmed, they might seek support from a mental health professional. It's too much too fast for their system to integrate their newfound experiences. It is traumatizing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a spiritual emergency is a crisis. It can be traumatic, versus a spiritual awakening. It's just, there's this beautiful spiritual life out here. Yeah. Oh, how blissful and easeful. And I can just walk into it. And here's my community, right? Here are my people who can understand me. I'm not crazy. This is perfectly fine. Yeah.
Right. There's so you feel more held and guided. Whereas an emergency, you're kind of just dropped in and you don't have the coping mechanisms. And that, I would assume, is where you can come in to help them. Hi, it's Rachel here. If you'd like to dive deeper into your own self-development, but you're looking for an alternative to traditional talk therapy, I think you'll love the Foundation of Self Immersion program. For a full year, you'll get dynamic coursework you can complete on your own time, plus weekly coaching calls and monthly one-on-one sessions with me for personal support. Visit foundationofself.com and click on the events page for more information. That's foundationofself.com. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, because, and some individuals do come to me who have had a spiritual awakening and they're just looking to more sort of embody those insights. But I love to work with people who are in crisis. Yeah, as a therapist, I think that there's very few people out there like me that can hold both spiritual beliefs, but I know you do. Yeah. Maybe like just the two of us, right? But like that can hold spiritual values and psychological models and hold them with reverence instead of just saying, well, no, there's only Western psychology and spiritual values are completely woo-woo and out there and completely insignificant. No, right? But let's hold both of them. And yeah, I like crisis situations. I don't I know that's like a weird thing to say, but that's where my strength comes in.
Beautiful. No, I mean a lot of therapists are very averse to crisis situations because it's too much even for them. And yet this is what you do. This is, this you're the person they call when things are out of control. So let's talk about that for a second. What are some aspects of the work that people might expect when they come to you in crisis, in a spiritual emergency? What do you help them with in general?
Grounding tends to be a huge one. A lot of these individuals, when they're in crisis, they tend to be highly ungrounded. Yeah. So grounding is one. Setting boundaries, just like we set boundaries with our family and with ourselves, we need to learn to set boundaries with the spiritual dimensions as well. And also knowing like what is mine and what is theirs, and where does my body end and where does something else begin. Yeah. So boundaries is another one. Meaning making, right? So I saw little people walking around my room. What do I do? Right? What does that mean? Does that mean that my reality is completely false? Right? Does that mean that I have aliens in my bedroom? Like, what does that mean? So meaning making is a huge one as well. And I really want to stress that in the process of meaning making, I don't impose my own beliefs. Yeah. So the fact is that we have no clue what reality is. Like, we don't know, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say my spiritual ideas are the truth because I experienced them and this is truth. I don't know what truth is. So truth is something that is co-created in relationship, right? And I really want to invite individuals in the process of making meaning from their experiences for them to create their own stories, right? And to be conscious around the stories that they're creating from their experiences. Yeah. So those are three that are quite big. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love this idea that it's their experience, and so the true author and the true person who can make sense of what's going on is the person who is experiencing it. It is their reality. It's very postmodern, but that's what it is, right? We are co-creating the world we live in. That's a shamanic perspective as well. We dream our world into being. So to have, it sounds to me like, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that you're helping them find that self-agency in their experience. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and to feel empowered around their experiences, right? To say, hey, I can have a little bit of control here, right? And I can know I am the expert in my own life and I can create meaning out of these experiences. I can know what this is. I'm not going to be handicapped in needing a spiritual teacher to tell me what my experiences mean. No, I can have enough solid foundation and a basis to be able to figure out my own way here. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's beautiful. And the the idea of embodying their insights, right?
Yeah.
What it means to, and we talk about in psychedelic journeying, we talk about the importance of process and integration. So you have the experience, but if that's all you have, and I've had clients who have been really messed up by an ayahuasca trip or psilocybin journey or whatever, and they're saying, I don't know, and there was no one to help them with, again, like what you were saying, what I saw, the messages I received, the idea of processing, making sense of, embodying this, and then the integration. How will what you experienced, what the gift, I call it the gifts you bring back from the journey,
Mm.
how do you apply those into your daily life, right? So if you could talk for a second about the self, about what does an experience like this that they might have, whether it's psychedelic or spiritual or mystical, what does it mean to assimilate those insights?
I think you named it. It's the embodiment of it, right? It's not living separately of saying, here is my spiritual life when I sit down on my meditation cushion and meditate around how interconnected I am with everybody, versus here I am in my day-to-day life and I am experiencing the interconnection, right? But everybody's integration journey is going to be unique to them. But really it's coming into sort of this wholeness, right? Not seeing anything as apart from us, but just that we're connected to everything. We're a part of everything. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And so that leads me to the next question, which is, when we talk about the integration part, so all of this is, internal experience and maybe what their subjective vision or experience of the world. Talk, if you would, a little bit about the integration into physical reality that you help people with in that regard.
Um, my experience and this is my current understanding is that the body needs to be involved. There's huge physical changes that happen within the body. So, and that can look differently for every individual. Yeah. So some people just need a lot more time in stillness and to not practice yoga or qigong or any energy practice. It might just be walking in nature. Yeah, that's their physical practice. Um, some people have what can appear as very scary physical expressions of the body. Yeah. So shaking that is not conscious, that isn't done by the conscious brain of I'm choosing to move my arm. Yeah. But there's an authentic shaking or like yogic postures that may happen or things with the hands that may happen. So all of that needs to be expressed. Yeah. The other things on a physical level is that there tends to be a lot of emotions that come up to the surface to be healed. Yeah. So things that might have been experienced a long, long time ago during this moment of crisis, everything gets what's the word? Upheavaled? Did I just make that word?
I think upheaval, upended, maybe.
Upended. There we go. Thank you.
I like yours. It's a combination of the two. Upheavaled. I'm going to use it. Why not?
Sometimes I make up language.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Um, so everything gets brought up to the surface, right? Like things that may have been experienced even in the womb, right? Even as a baby, in childhood, all of this is brought up to the surface. And if the individual has suppressed emotions for a very, very long time, there's going to be a point of learning, allowing the body to learn how to express itself. Um, and again, these expressions are various, right? Like it can be shaking, it can be various movements, it can be huge emotions. Um, but there's that on the physical level that is sort of the first step. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would imagine when you have involuntary shaking, for example, that can be very frightening. Does
It
that
is.
happen when, does it happen to you in session with them, or like they're experiencing it then, or is it like they come to you as this is one of the symptoms that I'm having, or is it both?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
both.
So if somebody's
And
actually working with that, what are some techniques that you use, or how do you manage that? Especially when there's a fear state attached to it.
yeah, so grounding, coming
Yeah,
back to
what does that mean
grounding.
for you? So some of the listeners might know the concept, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, so feeling like the feet on the ground, taking the eyes and, moving them around and knowing where I am in my environment. Yeah, so connecting to the physical world, feeling my feet on the ground, using the toes, yeah, to dig into the ground, using the feet muscles. For some people, they might be more energetic, so they can actually move their energy in their body and to settle into a chair. And that can be, instead of having the energy up in the head, they can, okay, I can move my focus of awareness to my seat and my legs and my feet, right? Allowing that heaviness to come. So there's a grounding. Then there's this idea that of moving like a pendulum. Yeah. So allowing the shaking, yeah. Experiencing it, containing it, normalizing it. That's huge. Yeah. That this is a normal experience you're having. Even if you haven't seen other people and you haven't seen people talk about it, it's a normal experience that you're having, and I've got you. And once the shaking will need to be experienced. Yeah. And then just knowing that we can come back and we can release it. Yeah. And trusting that the shaking or the movements, that there is if this is possible, but to trust that there's a higher wisdom at work. Yeah. To trust that the body is wise and that it knows to release things that it might have held for a really long time. And that if my body, so for me, what was happening to me was during meditation is my body would keep twisting. Yeah. And I would keep twisting and I would try to come back and, focus on the breath, be still, because that's meditation practice, right? Because um, I was taught in the Zen Buddhist tradition, which is be extremely still.
Yes. Yeah.
And and then my body would keep moving, right? And then I was told, well, just let your body move. Just let it move. And once there was this acceptance that I could have for myself, then, oh, well, I could just move and then the body would naturally come into stillness on its own. Right. So there's this allowing, accepting the movement, letting it be so that we can move through it, and knowing that when things become too much, that we can bring our attention to our feet. Yeah. That we can use the breath. Oh, okay. Let me come back into grounding, into here now, because this is too much. And allowing the system to learn how to move between these extremes. Yeah. And a lot of this is quite body oriented psychology, right? So my current understanding, and I strongly stand by this, is that the body really needs to be involved in these processes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that the wisdom of it really needs to be
Yeah.
involved.
How could it not?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, but I love that story where, the allowance part of it, because that there is a resistance. This is something my body doesn't normally do during meditation. Now I'm freaking out, and there's a holding. And it reminded me actually of the best advice I ever received before any psychedelic journey, which is do not resist what is presented to you, no matter how scary. Push through. And I've had my own experiences where you're having these visions that are really terrifying, and then rather than hold, and that's why people have bad trips, because they're holding back from what is being given to them. And
Mhm.
so but to move toward it, allows it to complete its cycle, which is, I believe I'm understanding what you're saying about the physicality.
Exactly. And maintaining that belief out like beyond the psychedelic journey, right? Like
Yes. Yeah.
once the medicine has worn off and has moved through the system, the body might still be moving, and
Mhm.
knowing that that's okay, that that's normal, and to keep allowing, keep accepting, keep expressing. Yeah, that the journey doesn't end once the medicine has left the body. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, that's when the work starts, really.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? It's like it takes us a minute to process that and integrate what has happened. And you yeah, 100%. The body is still moving that stuff through it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like for some people, there's huge bodily sensations. They shut it down. And what happens then is there's this huge depth of depression.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and even in the depth of depression, just allowing that, being with that, like, wow, there's a lot of grief that's coming up to the surface here for me that might be linked to stuff that has happened before, maybe within my life, maybe to my ancestors, things that have been passed down through the generations. And those same qualities, yeah, acceptance, self-compassion, curiosity, allowance, yeah, just moving gently instead of suppressing and pushing away, because that's the challenge, right? When we resist, then it becomes scary, overwhelming, fearful. Oh my goodness, I can't control this. But if there can be enough relaxation and to flow with the process, then it can become a lot more easeful for individuals. And I really think that just naming the fact that this is normal, that you're not alone in this, that this is something that many people have experienced, can be extremely um, uh, uh, easeful for individuals to hear. Yeah, it can bring a sense of ease and relaxation. Like, okay, I'm not going crazy. This is part of the experience. Even if I didn't know about it before,
Mm. Yeah, I
I'm
remember
okay.
when I was studying hypnotherapy and as a clinical hypnotherapist, which is one of the things I started with, that you actually tell the clients you may start shaking, your body temperature may drop or increase, and all of that is normal, and you may yeah, involuntary movements are natural as part of this process. And when you think about it, hypnotherapy is also, when you're dropping into the subconscious, when you're shutting off the talking mind, it's kind of the same thing
Yeah.
as that mystical experience. So uh let me ask an obvious question.
Okay.
What what happens? I am not in control of this. I've already spoken to the ghost in the machine. It does not. For those listening, Zoom likes to put a little emoji bubble whenever I move my hands because I'm Italian and I like to talk with my hands. I got a little thumbs up bubble. So, in anticipation of my fabulous next question, which is what happens when people don't do this processing work and integration work that you are talking about? Why is it important for the individual? This is a two-part question, but for the individual, why is it important, and what happens if we don't do this?
Um, yeah, so this is a tricky question, right? Because there hasn't been enough research done on this. Yeah, but there is such a thing as healthy integration, and then there's such a thing as unhealthy integration. Yeah. So the idea is that with healthy integration, individuals begin to walk a conscious journey and they enter a period of healing and transformation. Yeah, that is ultimately a positive developmental experience for them, right? Like post-traumatic growth, that kind of stuff, right? Unhealthy integration, individuals can get stuck. So there can be a sense of grandiosity, right? I am special, I am unique, I'm gonna start holding space for other people. Um, without training, without a foundation, um, really not ready to enter that space, right? So there's a sense of grandiosity. The other thing is they can completely negate their experience and they'll just go back to life as they previously lived it. No, oh, that was just a fun experience that I had. How exciting. Here I go back now to my mundane life, being whatever state of mind they were previously in. Yeah, drinking alcohol, partying, being bored, watching TV endlessly, being super disconnected from self, other cosmos. Um, and and there's this other thing which I'm kind of playing around with, and I'm hesitating naming it because I haven't. I'm still trying to formulate it. So, but I do think that individuals can also get stuck in this place of being in the in between, where they're not fully yet in this consensus reality, and they're still kind of stuck in the spiritual, and they're thinking that the spiritual is the only reality, whereas it's both and and this idea of being stuck, like that's where I haven't formulated it because I haven't quite been able to decide or figure out where it becomes psychosis. Yeah, so if it's a spiritual practice that brought these individuals to these states and now they're stuck in these altered states and they can't quite ground back in. So as you can see, like my mind is still puzzled. I'm still chewing on this. This is something that I've been kind of sitting with for a couple of years, and I don't have it formulated yet, because I do sense that there is something there to look at, but we haven't, like I'm still looking at it, and I haven't yet quite found individuals to talk about it and to look at it with me.
Yeah, and that's what this is all about, right? Is constantly learning and growing and peeling back different layers of these experiences and what well, actually that's beautiful because it leads me to the next part of the question, which is I was going to say the impact it has on the community, the larger community, your individual experiences. So yeah, let's talk about that for a second. The work that you do with your clients and your students, um, is part of it uh, community oriented in one way or another? Or how can their personal awakenings and integrations affect their community at large, either locally or globally or whatever?
I find that it does, for whatever reason, individuals who have these types of experiences, especially when it becomes emergency or crisis situations, that they're really called to being in service. Yeah. So that means leaders in pushing the I want to swear, is that okay?
Of course it's okay. I mean, I should just have a sign here that just lights up. No, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Right, like our fucked up system. So individuals that have had a different experience and like have these embodied spiritual values, that then they're called to living in service and to pushing our systems that are no longer working for us on a global scale. Yeah. And that might mean becoming therapists. A lot of these individuals turn to a healing profession. Yeah. Almost everyone that I've come across turns to a healing profession, whether it be energy work or therapy or some sort of like teacher, yeah, or psychedelic like everybody. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I'm not at all surprised.
Right.
Because when we awaken, the first thing we want to do is help everyone else awaken, you know? Yeah.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like I remember I remember in my own experience, there was a period of time, and I say it now with just sort of like self-compassion for myself and a bit of the humbleness because I didn't want to talk to anybody who wasn't spiritually minded. Like if they were practicing yoga and they didn't meditate daily and they weren't spiritual, like I didn't want to interact with them. Right. So anyways, there's that side of it too. But really to go back to your question, right? So once individuals enter a life of service and they have embodied these spiritual values, right? And they do come to all of their interactions from a place of compassion and humility and grounding. And hey, we're all like, there's this more beautiful, greater intelligence to the cosmos, however way they comprehend that. I wonder how our world would change, right? Like, I wonder, would we still be doing to the soil what we're currently doing? Would we still be building our homes the way that we're building our homes right now? Like, would we still be packaging all our food in all of this plastic? Like, there's so many things like politics, healthcare, education, like everything across the board, right? Because individuals in these states, personal experience, and from the people that I've worked with, step back and they're able to have such a huge, like an expanded perspective on society and all the things that are wrong. And then they come with this huge passion of, I want to change. So yes, they're going to have, they tend to have huge impacts on their communities. Yeah. Not just their families, but their friends, communities, some even globally. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not even like you have to become a community leader. Like your energy is part of that. The way that you see the world and what you choose to do with your energy makes that impact as well, I would think.
Yeah, how you talk about things, what you talk about, what you give your energy to, how you move through, like all of these things begin impacted if there's the integration. Right? If there's no integration, if people just, oh, that was a beautiful experience, and they go back to their regular life, then it's just, they've been sort of like, what is it, like flash fried in a pan, and then they just like go back to their previous.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what many people do. It's like, oh, I had a great time. It was a great trip. And now I'm back and, no souvenirs, but you know what I mean? So beautiful. This is amazing. And I could talk about this all day, but we do have to stop the episode for this time. I'm sure I'll have you back. Andra, how can people find you?
They can check me out on my website. That's probably the easiest. There's a contact form there. They can shoot me an email and get in touch. And you're probably going to share the links to my website because my name is terribly difficult to pronounce and to spell.
Go ahead and spell it for us so we know what it is for people who are poised over their keyboards right now.
ANDRADEDIU.com. So andradediu.com. And Instagram might be easiest, which is integration.work.
Okay.
That might, beautiful. That might be
and yes, I will have these links in the show notes for people. Beautiful. Andra, it was amazing to talk to you today. Thank you so much for being on Self Talk.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
Hi, this is Rachel Astarte from the Self Talk podcast. I'd love for you to send me your emails with questions or stories about yourself. What are you looking for? What are your questions? What are you grappling with in your own personal life that has to do with your identity, with yourself, with your very existence? These are the things that we're going to talk about during the podcast. And go ahead. It's all right. Get deep. I can handle it. So send them to Rachel@selftalkpodcast.com, and I'll see you on the next episode.